Hey guys, today I want to talk about what the heck is happening in the world and why is it affecting us in the Philippines? And does it really affect us in the Philippines? Well, it's surely affecting our oil prices, and some of our Western food prices are going through the ceiling. And it's also causing inflation even in the Philippines. And the threats of nuclear war, as we're hearing from Putin and Biden, and the talk that's going back and forth. You know, a lot of us people here that just are regular people and we're not politicians and everything, wish that these two idiots would just sit down and just talk and say, hey, look, we got a lot of people here and they all get along. Why can't we get along? But instead, of course, they have all this stuff. They have to have all this bravado and everything, and it's hurting our world. And a lot of our leaders are a lot of huff and puff, let's face it. You know, I mean, and I don't really want to get into who's the huff and puff and who's not, and the past one was worse than this one and stuff like that. So please leave it off. You know, I really don't want to see it on there. I just want to say this, that every politician is a lot of huff and puff sometimes. And sometimes I understand that they have to be, because when somebody's doing a lot of bravado out there, like North Korea or whatever, or Putin, it gets, you know, to be a little bit too much, and people start getting concerned, and people want to know that, you know, hey, somebody's got to tamp this down. But it seems like instead of tamping it down, they tamp it up. You know, they tamp it the opposite way. And it just gets a little bit worrisome for all of us. But I want to say this here. The other day I saw an article. It was about 10 countries that are most likely to survive nuclear war. And there was a whole bunch of them on there. I'm not even going to mention what they are, but I'll put the link in the description if I can find it. Okay? Anyhow, what happened was they had a whole list of things, of countries on there. And I noticed that the Philippines wasn't on there. And the thing that bothered me about that was, I think the Philippines, if there was a nuclear war, this would be the place to be living. In all honesty, this is the place to be staying. And I think it should be on that list. I don't think there's any top country that you could live in that would be better than others. Because, I mean, you got, one of the countries was New Zealand, another one was Greenland. I believe Denmark might have been on there, Norway, Iceland. There was quite a few countries on there, and I believe Australia might have been on there, I'm pretty sure. There was a lot of countries that were on that list. If there's a nuclear war, these countries are the most likely to fare the best. And I got to tell you, the Philippines, the way it is, and the way it has 7,000 something islands, is a perfect spot for that, if you have food. Now, Filipinos are known for survival. During the war, when there was food shortages all over the place, that's where they learned to do the things that they do. Go food foraging out in the forest. They learned from their relatives and stuff. Hey, this plant here is good to eat. This one here grows this here. This one here, the roots are really good. I noticed that there's a lot of wild sweet potatoes and yams here. I don't see any over here, but there's a lot of them around. And a lot of the people, they root them up as soon as they see them, because they add them to their food, they add them to their meat or whatever, and they do that constantly. And if you learn from these people, if worse comes to worse, that's what you're gonna be eating, you know, here, if something happens and there is a food shortage. We're lucky in that we have money, and if food prices go up because of food shortages, we'd probably survive really well. Most of us would fare really, really well. Filipinos wouldn't fare so well. And it would probably be rice shortages, fuel shortages, along with all the other stuff. You know, if something, and also Wi-Fi and stuff like that might go down, satellites, things like that. We kind of have to worry about that in today's world. I remember when I was 13 years old, I wrote an article. I sent it in to the Christian Science Monitor. Now, I'm not a Christian scientist, but when I was a kid, I remember walking by all these stores. They were like small stores, and they had Christian Science books and stuff like that. And my aunt, she was big into the Christian Science Monitor, because she would write poetry, and she would send it to the Christian Science newspaper, and they would print it for her. And when I heard that, I was like, hey, I'm gonna start doing that. So I wrote an article, and they put it in their newspaper. And I was 13 years old, and I wrote about nuclear war, because it was during the height of the Cold War during the 70s, you know. And it was kind of scary. You know, actually the height was probably during the 60s and 70s and 80s too. You know, it was during that time that we had the Cold War going on, you know, and there was it was kind of scary, and it was worrisome for me as a kid of 13 years old to worry about that. It was one of the reasons why I actually went into the Navy actually and got on nuclear submarines. You know, I thought it was kind of cool. If anybody's going to survive, a nuclear submarine is going to survive. You know, and later on, after I thought about it, I was like, well, they're going to be hunting them down after they launch those missiles for sure. And I found out when I got into the Navy. But I did like being on nuclear subs. I liked it for a short time. I was glad I was able to serve on nuclear subs, and I was really happy about that. But I want to say this, is that we got to start thinking about this stuff more. And I know it's a hard thing to think about sometimes, but here in the Philippines, and I'm not trying to scare people. Somebody's called me when I talked about the flesh-eating disease, somebody called me like a fear monger or something like that, and I took it down because I'm not trying to produce fear here. I'm not trying to get everybody scared and worried and concerned about all this stuff. That's not what I'm about, and that's not what I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to get people to think, because, you know, at some point, something's going to happen. It might just be a regular war. It could be a nuclear war. It could be food shortages, which are happening some places in the world already. But be ready to a certain point. And some people are talking about like Wi-Fi. Hey, Steve, maybe we need to get Starlink, you know, and I'm thinking about actually getting Starlink soon too, so I can have that and I don't have to worry about, you know, having Wi-Fi go down and being able to contact my family or whatever and let them know that I'm still alive. That's concerning, you know, and if Wi-Fi and all that stuff does go down, that's when we got big problems. Because if the infrastructure for all this stuff goes down, either in the United States, Russia, and all these other countries, a lot of other stuff is going to start happening. And it has a kind of a domino effect in the world. And we really have to be on top of this. Like a lot of guys say, well, I really don't care. Until it happens, you know, until it happens. And I'm not trying to be Steve the prepper or anything like that. I'm trying to be Steve, hey, let's at least have a little bit of stuff aside so that if something happens, we're ready, you know. I do think that with the bombing of those pipelines, you know, off of Sweden and that area, I do think there's going to be something going on, some sort of retribution. The fact that Sweden did not come out and say who did it, and they did an investigation, they said they know who did it. The fact that they didn't say kind of says that it could be one of the NATO nations, and I'm not going to say which one because I'm not 100% sure, but the fact that it happened, you guys know what I'm talking about, the fact that it happened says to me that there's going to be some retribution. And I honestly believe that. You know, now, the administration, the Biden administration, has said several times that they might go after it. You know, if this and this keeps on going on, if the war keeps going on, they're going to attack those things. And when I saw that, I was like, this is kind of concerning, throwing out what you're going to do so they know what you're going to do. You're better off not saying that than saying it out loud. And our president, you know, he says what he says sometimes, and you know, I understand why he says what he says sometimes, and sometimes I don't. You know, sometimes I just shake my head and say, okay, you just spilled the beans, you know. And I'm concerned about the politicians that we have in power today, because they're not peaceful people. They're not people that we should even be voting in. They're not people that represent the people anymore. They represent corporations. I mean, sometimes I think these guys should be like race car drivers, you know, and they should have to wear a jacket around and it should say, I belong to Enron, or I belong to Gulf Oil, or, you know, Texaco, or whatever. You know, these politicians, I'm just using them as an example, you know, and they should have to wear that so people know who's sponsoring them. So we know the truth. And that's what concerns me in this world today. And I don't like to talk politics that much, and in this here, I'm just kind of stating my thoughts, and I am kind of venting a little bit about politics and stuff like that, and politicians. But you know, as we go on in life, we definitely need to play it safe more, because if something does happen, us as expats can't fall back on the government for help, especially being outside of our own country. I'm sure if there was feeding programs and stuff like that, they would feed the Filipinos first. And let's be honest about that, we would be the last ones out, and for good reason too, because that's who they should be taking care of. But anyway, guys, I want to discuss that a little bit today. It was kind of sitting on me. It was on my chest for a while, and I said, I want to talk about that. I've been kind of avoiding it because it's kind of a dark subject. It is a very dark subject, and I did want to talk about it just because I think it's something you guys need to start thinking about. But I do think that the Philippines is a place that's going to survive. But the question is, food-wise, how much is it going to survive? We do have a lot of fish here. We do have a lot of chickens. We can raise chickens fast. We do have a lot of forest here where chickens eat. So I mean, you don't really have to worry about having corn for the chickens and stuff like that, because they go out and get their own food around here. They forage all day long. And anyway, guys, God bless. Take care, and be thinking about this stuff. Have a plan in an emergency. Have plans for water, food. Have a little bit of an emergency supply, at least 3 months. We've talked about that before. Have some medical supplies. Possibly even have some iodine or something like that if you think that some of that radiation might reach us here, which it probably will. But if something happens like that, I don't think we're going to get that far into it. But I do think that at some point it might happen. But I do think we are going to have a conventional war like we are right now in the Ukraine, and it seems to be ramping up a little bit stronger. God bless, guys. Take care.